Today, we got a big case of facts or cap, as it was reported that the Chicago Bulls reached out to the Washington Wizards about trading up from number 4 to number 1. We're going to talk about the facts and the cap in that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to talk about the best players at number 38 for the Chicago Bulls. And the Chicago Bulls finalist list for their head coaching search is down to 5 names, reportedly. We're going to talk about those 5 names. All that and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and jump. Oh, wait, before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. About 40 to 42% of you guys that watch the channel every day are not subscribed to the channel. Hit that subscribe button as we're trying to get to 50,000 subscribers by the start of the season. It's a lofty goal, but why not set it high? We need about another 19,000 subscribers to get there, so there you go on that one. But let's go ahead and jump into the episode for today. I want to play facts or cat with this. Reportedly, this was according to Brett Siegel that the Chicago Bulls reached out to the Washington Wizards about trading up to number 1. But I want to be clear here. This does not mean that a deal is close, right? Chicago reportedly checked in on the number 1 overall pick, as I feel a lot of teams had, almost right after. I think it was like not even an hour after the draft lottery. It was reported that the Washington Wizards are comfortable moving down in the right scenario because they feel comfortable about any of those players in the top 4. And so, of course, that means that they were open to business, to discussions and things like that. I would say probably most of the teams in the NBA, when the number 1 overall pick, and in this case, if any top 4 pick is open to be traded to, I think most teams are probably going to reach out just to see, hey, do we have something that you would be interested in for that number 1 overall pick? And that's what I think is happened here, right? I don't think like any type of advanced deals happened or conversations are happening, anything with that. Brett Siegel also in that same thing said that the Bulls have no intention of trading the number 4 pick unless it's to move up. So that right there, any talks about the Bulls trading down to acquire more assets, trading down and drafting Darius Acuff while they get more assets, all that's done. Right now, that's if you take the reporting by Brett Siegel, for what it is, right? And as I say with every reporter, and this has nothing to do with, I have nothing against Brett Siegel. I actually have a lot of respect for Brett Siegel. I say this with everybody. I say this with Joe Cowley. I say this with my favorite writer, Elias Schuster. I say it with take everything with a grain of salt that you hear and that you see on social media, because aggregation is a real thing nowadays, right? Aggregation is a real thing. You have so many pages that take bits and pieces of something and then post it and then try to make it seem like it's something that it wasn't, right? But I think that, hearing that the Bulls called the Washington Wizards about possibly trading up for from number 4 to number 1, it's just Bryson Graham being aggressive, like doing his due diligence. Be aggressive, but not reckless, right? And I think that with the Bulls having the chance to add talent at number 4, number 15 that they do, that you're adding some really good talent and potentially 2 long-term starters on your team at those positions. So I'll say right now that this is facts. I say that it's facts, but within reason. It's facts, but it doesn't mean that advanced talks happen. It doesn't mean that any real momentum happened on the deal. It doesn't mean that anything is pressing or going to happen at the start of the draft. You want to check every door to see what's available to you. And that is what I feel like this situation has really been. It's just checking every door. Now, for some people that have then asked, okay, what would the framework of that look like? We really don't know, right? Like, would moving up to number 1 really be worth it for the Chicago Bulls? And I'll say this, it depends on the price. You can't mortgage the future of your rebuild before it even starts. That's my opinion, right? If moving up from number 4 to number 1 would require like a future protected first, then okay, cool. I'm not even trading 4 and 15 to move up to 1 in this draft. Like, no offense, AJ DeBonta is my number 1 prospect in this draft, right? I want to be clear. He's my number 1 prospect in this draft. I would love AJ DeBonta on the Chicago Bulls. But at the same time, I would say this, when you look at all these top 4 players, they all have the chance to be franchise-altering talent. It would be different for me if this was one of the drafts where it was a clear-cut number one, and everybody below that was so far, there was so much gap between that. Even if you do view AJ as I do as the number one prospect in this draft, the gap between him and like Cam Boozer isn't as large as what it is in some drafts. So that's what it comes down to, right? So that's the ultimate question. When it comes down to trading up and how much of your future you're willing to mortgage, it has to come down to the player, the variance between the player at 1 and the player at 4, right? And you don't want to lose your flexibility early. Bryson Graham has talked about having all your own first-round picks. I don't think you want to immediately mortgage that by trading a future first or something like that. The Bulls need talent. And to get that talent, they're going to need multiple bites at the apple to get the talent that they need on this team. People, after this came out, a big conversation on social media was, well, would you trade Modest and the number 4 to move up to number 1? And some of the, more kind of knee-jerky Bulls fans, were reacting like, what do you mean you wouldn't trade Modest for that? And I think it just comes down to, like, I think this. Cam Boozer and Modest in the 15, for example, have more of a potential to actually turn into something than just AJ DeBonce at number 1 to actually turn your team around, right? Like, and that's what you have to look at it with. So, that's just the opinion I go in. I understand the people that are like, hey, listen, if you can get number 1, trade everybody to get number 1. But I think in this specific, and like I said, I would be on that side in other drafts. In this specific draft, I think that you take that, right? I think with the Bulls having 4, 15, and 38, that's rare flexibility you may never have again in a draft. And so I think you have to do that. Like, Bryson Graham makes the call, right? You make the call, you ask the price, but unless the standards are being reasonable in that, I don't think the Chicago Bulls should panic. There's no reason to panic and go all in. The Bulls are in an amazing and in a great spot to add some serious talent to this team, and that's what they need more than anything. So many Bulls fans are still caught up on, we need size, and we do, don't get me wrong, but it's the talent overall that you need right now. And that's the part that you have to look into and that you have to play into. So, we'll see what happens here. We'll see how aggressive Bryson Graham gets. I think that, like many Bulls fan, the conversation about moving up may be more about moving up from number 15 to get back into the lottery if the player that you want there you feel like is going to go in the lottery. I think that is the more realistic conversation at this present time than moving up to the number 1 overall pick. Again, my personal opinion, that's not to take away from any of your guys' opinion. This is something that, let it be a living conversation and let it be something that, we'll see what Bryson Graham does in that. And I think that has to ultimately be the thing that we look at here is what is Graham going to do? I'm trusting Bryson in this process until he does something that loses my faith or my trust. I'm trusting what Bryson Graham's decision is. And so we'll see what's going to happen in that. But let me know what you guys think. In hearing that the Chicago Bulls made a call with the Washington Wizards to move up potentially to number 1, how do you feel about that? What do you think that means for the Chicago Bulls as far as, how they're looking coming into this draft? I think the part that stands out is that they're only willing to trade number 4 if they're moving up. So, a lot of the other talk about trading down, acquiring assets, stuff like that. And that was, if you guys have been watching me for a while, I've been saying that. Not in this draft, you don't trade back out of the top 4. So we'll see what happens there. But with that said, I have personally been focusing very heavily on number 4 and number 15, right? And I've had a couple of episodes over the last month where I've talked about pick number 38. Didn't really do a deep dive into pick number 38, but I do think there are some legit sleepers on this board, right? The 38 pick is a big prospect here, right? And I think that this is, an opportunity for the Bulls to add a player that in a deep draft that, may be a little bit more raw, may take more time to develop, but could still eventually turn into that. This draft is deep enough that there is serious value in the second round of this draft, right? The pick number 38 could become a role player, a defender, a shooter, a developmental big, right? Those are the places that you can go with the 38th pick in this one. I think what like I've said multiple times before, it's up to Bryson Graham to maximize every potential asset that he has here, right? Good teams find players and value out of every pick, and that's where the Bulls need to be at with this one. You cannot treat the number 38 pick like a throwaway. And I would say under AK's tenure here, a lot of the second round picks were kind of treated that way. Like, not to say that we didn't have some that we tried to develop. We tried to develop Julian Phillips. Marko Simonovic was another player that we tried to develop, right? Like, we tried to do those things with those guys. It just never ended up turning out, right? Everybody, rightfully so, is focused on 4 and focused on 15. But I think 38 matters a lot, and there are a number of names here that can go for the Chicago Bulls that make sense, right? So my boy Elias Schuster over on Sports Illustrated put a list together of 5 prospects that the Chicago Bulls could look at number 38. I'm going to add one to this list as well, right? But I think the thing is, at 38, Don't look for perfect, but look for players that have a real NBA skill that you feel like you can develop that can turn them even into a role player. I think that's the key thing that you're looking here for number 38. And so let's look at this list that Elias Schuster put together, and then I'll add my one to it after that. So first on this, he has Zuby Ejiofor listed on this list. This is a player that played with St. John's. You notice him, the physicality that he plays with, 6'9" frame that he has there. He averaged 16.7 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.5 assists, which is really good for a big man too, on 53% shooting from the field throughout 37 games, right? And I think that when you look at it as well, he got to the free throw line 7 times a night as well, right? So there is questions to be asked about his overall NBA upside, but he's a strong guy. He has that tweener type of makeup and build pointed out here by Elias Schuster. And so the thing, what it is that could he end up turning into like a Paul Reed type center, a Nas Reed type, the Reeds, right? A Nas Reed type center where he can do a lot of everything. Right now, not the most traditional center, but you have a player that can give you those quality minutes. Does he turn into a starter? I doubt it, right? But I'm as I've said with a lot of these guys, I'm not putting a cap on anybody because he very well could, right? I think that when you look at this kid and what he did in the combine, his shot does look like something that you can work with, and he can develop a legitimate shooting. And if he can do that and stretch out other bigs, force other bigs to go out on the perimeter and defend him, that's where you get really good there. So because he measured in with a 7'2" wingspan at being 6'9" at the draft combine, I think that's really good, right? So I think overall, like adding him in a draft where, and everybody that you draft doesn't have to be your starter, right? Like even if you develop him as a long-term backup, I say this, that's good. Somebody who can play the 4 or the 5 long-term, can stretch the floor, solid defense, big physical frame. I wouldn't be mad at Zuby Ejiofor. Not one of my favorite prospects here at number 38, but a solid prospect overall. Next up, Elias here has Milan Momcilovic. I completely murdered his last. I'm trying to be better at not murdering people's last names, but it is what it is, right? When you look at this guy, he's 6'8". Again, another one of those sturdy frame guys. There has been some concerns, 3.3 rebounds per game, which you worry about a little bit, right? So you look at that part, but I do think that you look at a guy that can develop a jumper. He has a really solid jumper as well already. If you take a shot on him here, then you'll see. I don't think he has an elite skill set. Elias Schuster also points that out. I don't think he has like the ultimate ceiling, but he is a player that could be worth putting in some developmental minutes in. I do think when you look at some of the other players that could be here around 38, I don't know if Milan is the one that you would really go with a lot. But again, a guy who played at Iowa State, he had one of the best shooting seasons of his career as well last season, and a guy that could definitely help out. So I think that you look at that and say, hey, maybe he's somebody that you were checking off some boxes for, depending on who's there at number 38. Next up, Alex Karaban out of UConn is another guy. This is a guy who's a really good three-point shooter when it comes down to it. He could be up there on the board at 38. 38. I think he also has a chance to slide. Now, I don't know if he's there at 56 for the Chicago Bulls, but I think he does have a chance to slide overall as well. 24 years old, though, right? Like, I don't know how you feel about that. Like I said, in the first round, I'm a little bit more iffy about drafting guys that are already 24. But in the second round, you would hope that he's ready to contribute right away because of that, of his older age. But we'll see, right? I don't know if he's the most natural fit for the Bulls, to be 100% honest with you. Like, that's just my thing. I'm honestly surprised to see him on this list by Elias Schuster, but take that for what you will. One of my favorite guys that's on this list of Elias is Tarris Reed Jr. You guys know I talked about him on another episode. This is a guy who's just flat out traditional big man, right? He's tough. He plays really hard in the paint. 14.7 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks as well, over 35 games played last year. I tell you what, I think that the floor for him is very high. When I look at Tarris Reed Jr., I look at a guy that's kind of like in that, to compare it to a Bull, like in the Taj Gibson kind of mold, right? Not saying that he's a one-for-one comp for Taj Gibson, but in that same mode a little bit, right? He's also a 61% shooter from the free throw line, which I think that, I don't know how much he's going to develop a jumper in regards to that, but 260, so has that solid frame. And I think when you look at how he played in the draft combine and the scrimmages there, it was really hard for him not to stand out with the size, the way that he moves, those type of things. So I like him, right? I think that when you look at what Tarris Reed Jr. could end up turning into, and as a guy that has some athleticism as well, I think that he provides physicality in the paint, some things that the Bulls have been missing for years, and I don't hate him at all. And last guy on Elias Schuster's list is Joshua Jefferson out of Iowa State. Now, This is a guy that if you watch the most recent episode of Bulls Without Borders, one of the guys over there brought him up. I believe Phil brought him up. But I think when you look at this kid overall, 16.4 points per game, 4.8 assists, 7.4 rebounds as well. He made progress with as a three-point shooter last year. He has really solid field passing wise. I think this guy is kind of one of those traditional forwards that you look at, right? I don't know if he's ever going to become somebody who has stretches the floor, is looked at as a floor spacer. But I do think that as far as adding that toughness and that brand of basketball to the Chicago Bulls, he has the 2.1 steals per game is something that really stands out that he had, during his junior season, and then had 1.6 this year. Like a guy that can get in the passing lanes like that and force turnovers for the way that the Bulls are theoretically going to like to play with getting more up and down the court. I think that's really good there. Like Bryson Graham has talked about wanting to establish a defensive presence for this Bulls team. And so I think that that's somebody that definitely stands out as well. Now, I said there was going to be somebody that wanted to add to this list, right? And that's Baba Miller. I really I can't remember which one of you guys initially pointed out and said, hey, listen, go scout Baba Miller for me. And I'll tell you what, I really do like Baba Miller as a prospect for the Chicago Bulls in the second round. If he does fall there is some question that he can go in the first round, which if he does, great. I mean, good for him. No, not everybody's meant to fall to the Chicago Bulls, right? It's just the reality of it. But I think if you're having a conversation about people that can go in the second round, I don't think that you can overlook Baba Miller. Like, again, in the first round, beginning of second round, the Bulls don't pick until pick number 38. That's kind of, really decent far into the second round or the beginning of the second round. But this is a kid that averaged 13 points, 10 rebounds, almost 4 assists on 52% shooting from the field as well, almost a steal per game, over a block per game. Listen, I don't know what Baba Miller is going to turn into long term, but he's the type of person that I'd be willing to bet on his development, right? He played at 3 different schools over his 4-year collegiate career, which is a red flag for some people. He's originally from Spain, so take a look at that. But his 6'11", over 7-foot wingspan, legit over 220-pound weight. I think that this is a guy that you could develop as more of the type of modern forward. I just do think that. I really think that. I don't know how much of a three-point shooter he's going to turn into. He only shot 19% last year, which was the worst of his collegiate career. The best he shot was his junior year at 34%. But I think you have to include Baba Miller there, a senior, a guy that played all 4 years, a guy that is going to need some development till time. Don't make any mistake about that. But it is a guy that I think on any second-round list, you got to put Baba Miller on there personally. But let me know your guys' thoughts. Who stands out for you at pick number 38 for the Chicago Bulls? Let me know that down below. Before we get out of here, we've talked about the 11 candidates that the Bulls were rumored to get. Well, according to Brett Siegel, we know the 5 finalists for the Chicago Bulls position that are actually going to get in-person interviews. Chris Quinn, who is the lead assistant with the Miami Heat. The Bulls already requested permission to interview him. They were granted that permission. That's my favorite guy on this list. I think that Chris Quinn has all the makings, the personality of a culture builder, setter, and somebody that I would love to see set the Chicago Bulls. His offensive philosophies with having the spread out offense, I think is really good for the Chicago Bulls as well. I think the motion-based offense could be really good for the Bulls. The defensive intensity that he's going to force this team to play with, I think, go hand in hand with this team too. The players that he's developed and had a hand in developing, I think, translate for what the Chicago Bulls are trying to develop. I love Chris Quinn as an option here for the Chicago Bulls. Micah Nori is also expected to be a finalist. Now, Micah Nori is a long-term assistant, been an assistant for over 20 years. It seems like he's finally going to get his shot at being a head coach. Now, for some people, the longevity of being an assistant actually is a knock on him because they look at it and say, if he's been an assistant this year, why has he never been a head coach? What is going on there? And I understand the question, right? But I think that very similar to Tom Thibodeau's career trajectory, that's basically what Micah Nori's on too. So that's my thought process. Sean Sweeney, probably my second favorite option here, currently with the San Antonio Spurs. Their lead assistant, the associate head coach there, a guy that's already been given so much credit for developing guys that they have down there. You look at all the young players, the first, second, and third year players that they have that are playing meaningful playoff minutes. Sean Sweeney's been given a lot of the credit for development from the head coach there. I think also his responsibilities as X's and O's guy, more defensive leaning, but has also reportedly helped made some offensive adjustments for that Spurs team in some playoff series. So there's that. Dave Bliss, also a finalist for that. Another one of my favorite guys. I think Dave Bliss, coming from that Oklahoma City and me doing my own research on Dave Bliss, it really stood out as somebody to me that makes a lot of sense. And then lastly, Tiago Splitter is one of the 5 finalists as well. This is a guy that we've seen do it as a head coach with the Portland Trailblazers, coached that team to be above 500. Shaedon Sharpe, Donovan Clingan, Scoot Henderson, Denny Advia turned into an all-star under him. We saw a lot of progress under Tiago Splitter. Now, some of the people that have questions with that will say, well, how much of that progress was going to happen anyway, as Chauncey Billups has invested the development in those guys for years? And I'd say that that's a fair question to ask, but I think when you look at a guy that coached through adversity, didn't have any plans on being the head coach of this team coming into the season, has merged the European philosophies with the NBA philosophies, which I think offensively is amazing. Also coached solidly defense. They were the 13th best defensive team in the league, were the Portland Trailblazers last season. And those are reportedly, according to Brett Siegel, the 5 final finalists. Now, one thing that's interesting is we just heard Jerry Stackhouse and Johnny Bryant name added over the weekend too, but they don't seem to be finalists, at least not according to this list by Brett Siegel, for the final interviews for that team. I don't know what that means. Again, Johnny Bryant, I think with Kenny Atkinson and his playoff performance, he could get fired, and maybe he kind of knows I'm next in line for this Cleveland Cavaliers job and maybe pulled out. That's speculation, not reported. That's speculation on my part. So there's that part of it. So we'll see, right? Like Tiago Splitter's an interesting name on this list. Like I've said many times before, I can see a world in which each of these guys legitimately can be good NBA coaches. I think Chris Quinn, Sean Sweeney, Tiago Splitter, Dave Bliss, they are ready. These are young guys that have been assistants for a long time. Tiago Splitter was a head coach last year, and I think all these guys have big cases to be made that they could be the next great head coach. Micah Nori is the more veteran and elder statesman of these guys, but if you want to bet on somebody to come in and raise your floor, help set your culture, Micah Nori has done that and helped establish that with teams over his 20-plus career as an NBA assistant. So I think those stand out, right? So we'll see what's going to happen here. Overall, I say that this is, and let me not fail to point out too, Micah Nori does have head coaching experience in the playoffs after he had to take over for Chris Finch in a game in 2024 in the playoffs. So there you go in that one. So we'll see, right? Brett Siegel did report that the interview process is expected to extend into June, which means that we could not have our head coach until maybe a couple of weeks before the draft. So for those that were asking when this hire is going to happen, it could still be a little bit of a minute, guys. I'm admitting that to you. We just got to see what's going to turn out and what's going to happen with that. But that's my time for today. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I want to hear from you guys, though. How do you feel about the Chicago Bulls hearing that they made some calls to trade up? What would you give up to trade up to the number 1 overall pick? Who is your second-round sleepers? Who do you think are some players in the second round that have the chance to really maximize their potential and turn into legit NBA players? And then what do you think about this 5 finalist list that we now have for the Chicago Bulls' next head coach? Let me know that down below. Make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You guys can follow us at Bull Central Pod on every social media platform. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that is thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.